Good morning, everyone. This is Pastor Bonnie, and I so appreciate you stopping in to hear Chapter 2 of my newest book called Kingdom Rising, A Tale of Angels, Demons, and the End of Days. Yesterday, I had so much fun recording Chapter 1, and several of you stopped in and told me you couldn't wait for the next chapter. That's music to my ears. So I appreciate the feedback. This is a brand new, hot off the press manuscript. I don't even have the book done. I'm just going to record the chapters for you as I get them done. And I'm in the process of working with a literary agent to see if we're going to publish it. So I would really appreciate the feedback because I'm not quite sure whether I want to publish it myself or have another publisher pick it up. But I will tell you, it is so joyful to write because I actually hear the words on the inside. They're not my words, they're God's words. And so I pray that they will bless and uplift and encourage and bring insight. I do a lot of research with my books. I think most authors do. Even though it's a work of fiction, I want the things to be real and true and authentic that I write about. And so we will begin, and this is Chapter 2. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Ephesians 6:12. Peter Anderson ran his hands through the back of his hair. It was a nervous gesture he was unaware of. He was deep in concentration as he stared at the pages of the sermon he was working on. His Bible opened to a familiar passage of Scripture and one that was a favorite of his. But try as he might, he could not get Evelyn out of his mind, and he kept rereading the same passage over and over. This was so stupid. He hadn't thought of her in 5 years. He had dumped the thought of her out of his mind, closing himself off, never wanting to recall her again for the shredded ruins of his heart that had been done at her hands. Just for a moment, he allowed himself to remember. They had been friends way before he had fallen head over heels in love with her. She had taken his breath away the first time he saw her that day in high school when they were both going through freshman orientation. They were both 15 years old that year, sharing a birthday in the same month of October, and both being a year behind because their birthdays fell late. She had long, dark hair that hung in pretty waves all the way down to her waist. Slender and tall, she was only a few inches shorter than his 5'11" frame. She had the most beautiful eyes that he had ever seen in a woman's face. It was more than her outward beauty he was drawn to. It was her inner beauty that shined through the hint of a smile she gave him when their eyes met and locked for the first time. He remembered how her cheeks flamed red when he caught her looking at him as he turned back to look at her. The attraction was instant and would make them inseparable for the next 4 amazing, exquisite years. The attraction he felt for her only grew worse when he started attending her father's church. Pastor James McNeil was a man filled with faith and the love of God, and all were welcome in his home. His church, First Assembly, was near the high school, and Peter felt at home with the youth group, always wanting to be a youth pastor himself. He was drawn to Pastor James, who doubled as both the pastor and the youth pastor since it was a small congregation. It wasn't long before he was her dad's assistant and was often invited to their home for dinner. He came from an alcoholic, dysfunctional family, and so hers was a treasured oasis. He and Evelyn became friends first. He didn't want to scare her away with the force of his feelings towards her, so he took it slow and easy, and he wanted to be sure that God was in this relationship. He remembered their long walks around the block in the moonlight. His heart still fluttered at the way her eyes would shine, looking up at the stars and proclaiming the greatness of the Lord. He could talk to her about everything. She was an incredible listener and had her father's gift for putting people at ease. They talked about everything from scriptures and their shared love of the Lord, schoolwork, and his family. She held his head in her lap one night as he cried, telling her about the beatings he took as a small boy at his father's hands. He hadn't told a living soul, but he had trusted her enough to confide in her. She had prayed with him, and it was a powerful, moving prayer that freed him from the bondage of unforgiveness and hatred towards his father. The Lord made himself real to Peter in that moment, for he filled his heart with a love for his father that he had never experienced. It was so real that it changed his behavior towards his father in such a way that he himself wanted what Peter had. They had mended their relationship after that. His father had quit drinking because of it, and they had a close and meaningful relationship to this very day. It was all because of her. Then there was the missions trip the youth group took to Mexico. They had mown lawns, took out the garbage, and washed just about every car in town, and baked themselves silly to come up with enough so all of them could go. He remembered how the little kids flocked to her. They would follow her up and down the dirt roads everywhere she went. She always got down on the ground and played with them. The littlest ones, drawn to her kindness and genuine love for them, gathered as many as could fit in her lap. She wasn't just beautiful, she was intelligent and fluent in Spanish. She would sing in Spanish to the kids, and her voice was so rich and full that even the parents would come out of their doors to see who was singing. She ate meals with them, never minding the dirt, poverty, and smells. That made him love her even more. Silent tears ran unchecked down his face now. Unaware, he brushed them aside. Still deep in his thoughts and memories of her, even after all these years, his heart still ached for her not to be a part of his life. They were more than friends, they were soulmates. He never felt completely whole without her. She was part of the very air he breathed. He would have done anything for her, and he had loved her with every ounce of her being. They were inseparable, and it was assumed they would marry. He had saved every penny he had to buy her a simple 1-carat solitaire diamond ring. He had tucked it away in his drawer, waiting for the right time to ask her. They had proclaimed their love for one another many times, and he knew from the way that she looked at him, she meant it. She really meant it. He had finally chosen the perfect night. He had asked her out on a date and told her to get dressed up. She used to love to do that, and this night when he picked her up, she was even more beautiful than he had ever seen her. Her hair was swept upward with pretty curls at the top of her head cascading down her back. She wore a sapphire blue dress made of lace with a scoop neck and short sleeves. It showed off every lush curve, and it was just above the knees, accentuating her long, slender legs. His breath caught in his throat, and he was rendered speechless when he saw her. He had on the favorite suit she liked. Everyone remarked what a handsome couple they were. He was just under 6 feet tall with a muscular, athletic build, dark wavy hair, and eyes that were so dark brown you couldn't see the pupils. Evelyn used to comment all the time about his eyes. They were large and round, and she used to joke it wasn't fair that his eyelashes were thick and longer than hers. She used to tell him his expressive eyes were the windows to his soul, and she could get lost in them, and had on many occasions. "You are my handsome Prince Charming," she used to say with so much love in her eyes when she said it. They arrived at the restaurant, and he had a dozen yellow roses, her favorite, already sitting on the table. He had made arrangements with the maitre d' who was in on the secret. He had chosen a table far away from everyone else, way in the back corner. The lighting was soft, and there was relaxing music playing. Along with the roses, there was a beautiful candlelit dinner. He told her how beautiful she was and how much he loved her. Then, right there in front of everyone in the restaurant, he got down on one knee and proposed to the love of his life and the girl of his dreams, pledging his love to her from the depths of his soul. His heart sang when she jumped, squealing into his arms. "Yes, yes, oh yes," she joyously proclaimed. The entire restaurant clapped, and the maitre d' snapped a picture. He still had that picture, a headshot of them sharing their first kiss as an engaged couple. He didn't have the heart to throw it away, and it was still on his desk even now. When he looked at it, his heart was full of love for her. There would never be anyone to take her place. No, not ever. It was only 2 short weeks after that his life was changed forever, the day the world stopped. Her father died suddenly a week after he had proposed. He was so grateful he had asked for her hand in marriage, and Pastor James had said, "Peter, you know I love you like my son, and there is not a better man I could have ever chosen for my daughter. You know Mary and Amy love you too, and you are already part of our family. The only thing I ask of you is that you always put God first and that you take good care of my girl. Will you promise to do that?" "I promise. With all my heart, I promised." They hugged a manly bear hug, then, both unashamedly wiping happy tears down their faces. Peter and Evelyn were both working together at the church with the teens when Pastor James came in with a happy smile on his face, getting ready to say something to them. He suddenly grabbed his chest and dropped dead right there in front of them all. Peter was a volunteer EMT, and he tried everything he knew, but Evelyn's beloved father was not to be saved. Peter himself was one of the pallbearers. He considered it one of the greatest privileges of his life. The gossip mongers spread horrible rumors. The first few days, the church rallied around them, but because they didn't have a shepherd, there wasn't anybody to stop the rumors, and they said that Pastor James had had an affair, and this was God's judgment. Peter knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that it wasn't true, and so did most of the people that had gone to that church for many years. They didn't have a shepherd, though, and put a stop to it, so all the emotional stress over her husband's recent passing, Evelyn's mother, Mary, just couldn't take it. So she took Amy and moved away to start her life over again. She had offered for Evelyn to go, but Evelyn had decided on another course. He would never forget that day, the day his life stopped. The day she had given him back his ring and said she wanted nothing more to do with him or the God he served. She was mad at God and mad at him for his love and devoted service to him after her father had died. He understood that this was an emotional reaction to the actions of only a few. She felt like God could have saved her father for all he had done in all the years of his devoted service. No amount of trying to persuade her the error of her ways was going to change her mind. All he could do was love her enough to let her go and pray, and so he had. He realized as he sat there remembering that this was not just a walk down memory lane. Suddenly an alarm was roaring, "Pray! Pray now!" Recognizing the inner prompting, he immediately dropped to his knees, giving full vent to the urgent request. Praying fervently with all his might, he poured out all of the hurt and love for her that still remained, crying out for her soul, for all that she was and all that she could be again. He waged war in the heavenlies against unseen forces that meant to steal, kill, and destroy. He knew by the Spirit that her very life was at stake and her soul was in the crosshairs. "Jesus, deliver her from the pits of hell," he screamed into the air. "Save her! Deliver her! I ask this in the name of Jesus!"